I'm Doug Doherty from Hamilton Flourishing, and we're glad that you're here as we continue our conversations with people who are running in the Chattanooga municipal elections for mayor and city council. We have one mayor, but we have 9 city council people, and they're all up for election this March 2nd. Before we get into the interview, I want to tell you just a few things. The election is March 2nd. Voter registration ends February the 1st. Early voting will begin February the 10th and end on February the 25th. So keep that in mind. If you're watching this video and trying to find out more about Ken Smith, you've come to our website, or let me tell you about our website. At hamiltonflourishing.org, you can see a picture of everybody who's running for office. It's connected to either their Facebook and or their website, so you can learn about them there. And then we're trying to stack up interviews with all the candidates. We've done about half of them, and it's a little bit like pulling teeth. Some of them are more willing, and some of them are less willing. But anyway, we've got a bunch of them there, so you can learn all about the candidates there. You can also, if you don't know what city council district you're in, you can look it up and it'll tell you. It's hooked up to the Hamilton County Election Commission. You can also do voter registration by the internet over on that site too. It's also hooked up to the Election Commission. So it's kind of a one-stop site. You can register to vote. You can learn all about the candidates, and we use a standard questionnaire for almost all of these interviews, except when I'm interviewing an incumbent, which is a little bit different, which is the case today. And you can see the questionnaire there and see the people who didn't want to become interviewed, what they found so difficult. But today we're talking to Ken Smith. Ken, welcome.
Thank you, Doug. It's good to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you. You're looking snappy.
Oh, thank you.
Ken, you are you've been serving District 3 for 8 years, right?
Almost a full 8 years, yes, sir.
Yeah, and tell us, where is District 3?
District 3 is predominantly Hickson, so it's going to be everything east of 153 up to the county line, or up to the city line in the county, and then south of the river, but north of 58 is an area called Murray Hills. Beautiful neighborhood, kind of a hidden gem in the city, really. So everything north of 58, and then east of 153, and then there's a few areas west of 153, DuPont area, and then Northwoods up near the Target. It kind of crosses over and then comes back. Yeah. That's also my district.
Yeah, are you out knocking on doors and whatnot?
I'm out meeting people, but knocking on doors has been a little rough, a little challenging.
I forgot at the COVID thing.
Yeah,
it's
with
COVID,
really
it's hard.
Yeah, it is difficult. This is definitely new for campaigning this year, more than it ever has been in the past, but I'm a big believer in looking people in the eye if I have that opportunity, so I do try to get out when I can, but at the same time I would be very respectful of people's fear and safety and distance and everything else as well. I don't want to create fear by showing up on somebody's doorstep, but some of the people that I have reached out to I've gone and seen, so it's a little combination of both right now.
I can see that it would be a challenge. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure. I was born out in Nevada, actually. I'm a West boy, and I grew up there most of my life. Spent my high school, junior high years in Oklahoma, and moved out here to Chattanooga to go to UTC.
Did you really?
I did.
Yeah. What year did you start or graduate?
I started in '90. That used to seem like just yesterday, and it sure doesn't seem like it anymore. So. Yeah. Follow a lot of sports, and every time I hear when these guys graduated or when they were in high school, it's a shocking reminder for me. Anyways, it just seems
I get
too
that
good.
In spades.
In spades, yeah.
So what do you do for a living?
I am the VP of software engineering for a company called Marathon Health. They're based out of Indianapolis and Vermont, two different headquarters. So it's a national organization of, they manage clinics. We manage clinics around the country. We've got a little over 200 of them around the country. Some are on-premise. They serve employers only. And then some are off-premise, more of a strip mall, standalone kind of building situation. But it's not open to the public. It is employer-based healthcare that we provide.
But you're the technology guy.
Yeah, we are a highly tech-enabled organization. So most of what we do and what we will be doing in the future is going to be more from a technology side of providing health care to people.
And we talked about this before. You've got 3 children.
I do, 3. I've got a 22-year-old daughter, a 14-year-old son, and a 10-year-old son.
Well, those are good ages.
Yeah, they're all great, and the span has worked out really well. And enjoying the time that you have with all of them too. It's been great. Very active. They keep us busy, which is wonderful in and of itself. Really.
Yeah, that's great. Now we like to ask folks this: where do you go to church?
Hickson United Methodist.
Okay.
My wife and I have a habit of really showing up at churches all over the city. However. I've been a firm believer in the job that I do, that you can govern best when you understand the people that you govern. And although I represent District 3, votes I cast every Tuesday affect the city. So we go to churches really throughout the city, sometimes just pop in on Sunday to different churches to meet people. And
good for you.
Yeah, just get to know everybody through the city.
Because, one of the things that I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as an incumbent, is that although you're elected by a smaller group of people from a district and have to be an advocate in a sense for the district, you're also part of the governing body for the whole city.
Right.
And so there's got to be some sense of responsibility for the whole community as well as just your district. Would that be accurate?
That is 100% accurate. For me, over the years that I've served on council, it of course becomes more and more apparent. The longer you're there and understand how government works. It takes 5 votes to pass anything at the city council. So if you only have one person representing a district and there's an issue that comes before the body, you've got to have multiple people that are voting on that district. So it helps to be more familiar with it, at least in the areas, and to know that there is either a big sewage project or a YFD center rebuild or something pretty sizable. To actually know the area and know the community and be familiar with it helps when you're making some of those decisions as what's best for the city. So I try to be as knowledgeable as I can throughout the entire community, not just my district.
You've been doing this for 8 years, so you've got reelected once, so you've got plenty of experience. Here's a kind of a 30,000-foot question. You've been involved in this now, lived in Chattanooga for a while, since you started UTC mostly, and you have been 8 years in the city council. What do you think is the truth about the city? Is there's we're great with tourists, but then I've heard some people say, and we're great with entrepreneurs. We're the gig city. We get rated tops for outdoors activities and things like that. But then I've heard other people say, no, we're really 2 cities. There's the cities of people who, for instance, have supermarkets and those who don't. People who have to rely on public transportation and those who don't. People who, so they've talked about people who have poor schools, which is not part of a city responsibility, but people who don't. So they've said there's really 2 cities. I mean, I'm trying to say, what do you think is the truth about Chattanooga?
So it's interesting you ask that. So I consider myself a Chattanoogan by choice.
Okay.
I could do what I do anywhere that I want to be. And I chose to be here. I chose to stay here. And that's because I love Chattanooga. Now that said, I've also had experiences even before getting into government, and one of the reasons I chose to, of seeing that there is a different aspect of Chattanooga that a lot of people don't see, and that's whether it's outsiders, tourists, or whatever that may be. And it's not all bad, but there are definitely ways that we can continue to improve the city, because there are people here that live here that see Chattanooga differently than people that don't live here see Chattanooga. And a lot of that, to me, when I got into government, was the responsibility of those that lead this city. It's our job to bring business in and to bring people in and to continue to grow the city of Chattanooga, but that shouldn't be our sole responsibility. We should be just as responsible for the people that live here as the people that don't. And that's one thing that I have felt needed to be focused on a lot more over the years, and one of the reasons I kind of got into this in the first place, Doug.
From that perspective, tell me what you think is the direction we should be headed for the next 4 years.
So one thing that I looked at, and going back to the previous question, was, you kind of got Chattanooga as this bubble, and everybody, not everybody, but so many people from outside see Chattanooga one way, and quite a few people inside see it a different way. And shifting that focus, I think, is incredibly important. It doesn't mean ignoring the rest of it, because it's very important on both the statewide and national stage, that we're promoting Chattanooga as a great place to live, work, and play. But at the same time, if we don't ever focus on the people that live here, I want our citizens to feel the same way about Chattanooga that tourists do, or that people outside of here do. And I think that's going to take a lot of continued work and continued investment, not just dollars, but time. In a lot of our neighborhoods and a lot of our areas of our city that feel like they're left behind. If you go in and ask them, that's what they're going to tell you. And they shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't have people even out in my district looking to move into the county, and it hits me pretty hard because I border the county, and it's really easy to go, half mile down the road and only pay half the amount in property taxes because you're in the county. And they shouldn't be wanting to do that if we are providing the services and the focus to our citizens that we should be providing as a local government. So the direction that I see that we need to go is also focusing more on essential services and the things that we need to be doing to be a good local government for the citizens that live here, just as much as focusing on taking care of our image outside of this demographic.
This may be a little redundant, but let me just ask it everybody. What are the top 3 to 5 issues you think facing the city now? You've got the advantage of incumbency, but what do you think are the top 3 issues facing the city?
You have your default. You're always going to have it in public safety. We've seen that as a continued issue throughout our city. It doesn't matter what district you live in. Public safety is typically your number one, and it's the number one thing for government to provide.
Because I've heard this described 2 different ways.
Sure.
I've heard it talked about merely as a policing issue, but I've heard other people who I think are more broad-minded saying it all has to do with the safety of the neighborhoods themselves. So it includes things like public lighting, recreation centers for kids, parks, things like that. I mean, when you say public safety, and it does include the policing aspect, without question, but are you talking about the whole thing, or are you talking about...
It's the whole thing.
Okay.
I've never only considered it police. It is an all-encompassing subject, so it is really broad.
Okay.
But at the same time, so crime is a piece of public safety, but it's not every piece.
Okay.
Or the only piece, I should say. And it definitely is still something we need to stay focused on as a city.
Yeah.
But then there's also, to your point, you touched on it, there are aspects of our city that make people feel safe inherently in their own homes.
Right.
Just because you don't leave your home doesn't mean you may not have that air of safety. And some of that does have to do with, cleaner streets, brighter streets. It's not just police presence, it's how your neighborhood is established that helps you feel safe in that environment. It is when you go out and you walk your neighborhood. It's when, you touched on YFD centers. They're our number one place, in my opinion, for public safety of our children. Any children, no matter what situation they're in, should feel like they can go into a YFD and be safe. And that's safe from people, circumstance, whatever that may be. It should be a calming location, and we need to make sure that we're focused on that. But public safety is many things.
Okay. You got a couple more issues you think are priority coming up?
Sure. For me personally, it's always been about our first responders, police and fire. That creates that largest piece of public safety for the community. Comfort, not just safety, but comfort. The other piece is our infrastructure. It's not super exciting to talk about to a lot of people, but I don't know that I've met anybody that lives in Chattanooga that doesn't think our roads are in bad shape, and it's been a while.
And
that's
infrastructure
continued.
Also includes sewers.
Sewers, yes.
Which is a big. I live on Signal Mountain, and it's a huge deal.
It's huge, and it's
so expensive.
Millions,
it's
and hundreds of millions of dollars, not just a few here and there. And there's people that feel that on their sewer bill every time they pay it. It's a big thing, and that has to do with the consent decree that came down from EPA back right before I took office.
Right.
So we're still working on that to get us out of that problem.
But when we talk about infrastructure, it's roads, bridges,
it's roads,
sewers,
it's sewers, absolutely.
Streams, the river. I mean, it's all that stuff.
It's the stuff nobody thinks about. And you
But
don't
you've
think
gotta
about it
have.
unless it's broke.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the wrong time to be thinking about sewers and roads. But we have for many years. You know, we've
we kinda
neglected those
kicked the can
systems.
down
That's
the
right.
road.
And that's
Yeah.
why we're in the situation we're in, and we need to not be doing that moving forward.
What would be, I'm just curious what your thoughts were if you thought about this. What would be, I think the city spends, what, $2 or $3 million a year on roads? What should they spend on roads?
When I took office, it was $1.7 million for a $2 billion asset. So think about the maintenance of something like that, that is beat every single day by weather and cars. We were spending $1.7 million on a $2 billion asset. That is insane. So it's natural to be in the situation that we're in. So it was a top priority for me, and I think today we're right around $8 million instead of the 1.7. I think back at that time in around 2013, it was estimated that we needed to be spending around $10 million to maintain our decent roads. That's not to repair the ones that are already in disrepair, but that was more in maintenance of the roads themselves. So we're slowly getting to where we need to be, but we're not there yet. I mean, we could easily spend double the $8 million, and there will still be roads that are in desperate need of repair. And that's every year for the entire city of Chattanooga. And that's not very many projects. It's expensive. You know, back in the early 2000s, it was around $20 I think a ton for, you know, the raw materials and asphalt, and it went up to $80, you know, over the course of several years. But our budget, our expenses didn't, our budget allocated for that expense didn't go up. Even though the raw material expense has gone up 400%, we weren't spending anymore. So you're immediately getting less and less and less done, even though you're increasing the budget, just trying to keep up
Does the
with the
city
cost.
contract out for road?
We do, yeah,
stuff?
we absolutely do. And I used to think that was something that we could do better of, but we're small. You don't think about it, but you know, from my perspective, I think these projects are big. We got $8 million. $8 million is a very small drop in the bucket for a lot of these contractors.
Yeah,
But
I hear
the
you.
equipment to pave a road, we don't want to own as a city
Yeah.
by any extent. So
Right.
yes, we do contract out those larger
I was
services.
just curious how that worked.
Yeah, we do a lot of the base repairs and things of that nature that prep a
Right.
road
Yeah.
for paving, but we don't do the actual paving itself. We can do small sections, 20 foot, 30 foot,
Yeah.
things of that nature, but not large stretches of road.
Do with the impact on the economy of COVID, sales, you have two general sources of revenue: sales tax and property taxes, right?
That's correct.
Sales taxes, I assume, revenues are down because a lot of businesses are doing less business and not doing as well. I read that somewhere. And then property taxes have to be raised, I'm assuming. Who raises or lowers property taxes?
Well, lowers typically never happens, but raises, you've got county and city both
Right.
are taxing authorities. So either
Is that
one.
a council thing, or is that an executive that proposes and the council approves?
So a tax increase always comes from the executive branch because it's part of a budget.
Okay.
So the mayor of the city presents a budget to the city council, and it will or will not increase or include a tax increase as part of that budget.
And do you all only get to vote up or down? Or do you
That is correct.
Okay.
Now we can, if you've got enough people that support it, you can dig down into some details and you can try to do some line item veto on a budget. Typically it doesn't happen. And part of that reason is we, as a council, our number one responsibility is to approve a budget so we can operate. That's our number one responsibility.
Okay.
One of our other top responsibilities is approving expenditures, so contracts typically. That's a lot of what we do every Tuesday is approve contract expenditures. What we cannot do is direct funds. So even if, say, I was able to get enough support to push through $20 million in paving, I can't make the mayor spend the money. I can't actually make the paving occur. I can encumber it in the budget, but I can't force it to be spent. So it's very much a collaboration with the executive branch and the council on what goes in the budget, because you can push really hard to put something in, but you can't actually make that happen. You can only push for the funding. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. We don't have the ability to create those types of contracts and spend the money. That lies with the executive branch.
Okay, thank you. With that sort of in line, do you see a tax increase coming for next year?
I don't. I don't see one coming. Now, that said, we don't know who's going to be mayor in the next few months.
Right.
Whoever comes in, they may already have a plan for a tax increase, even without understanding the budget. Nobody coming into office, nobody running for office right now, I believe, has the full understanding of what the budget really looks like. You can say you've read it. I've spent 8 years reviewing and approving budgets, and it is an incredibly complex and deep document. So it takes a tremendous amount of knowledge and work to really understand the budget. So there may be some people that think we need a tax increase. There may be some that don't. But they're going to be coming in just a few months before that budget's supposed to be approved. It doesn't really give a new mayor a whole lot of time, which is why we usually end up with a continuation budget on when a new mayor comes into office to give a few extra months to make sure that that can get
Now
put
the
into
budget's
place.
interesting enough. You can go online to Chattanooga.gov and you can see the budget.
Yes, you can.
It's divided into capital part and operating
That's
part.
correct.
And you can. I've been there and I honestly was lost. I couldn't understand it.
And it's better arranged
But
now than it's ever been.
But it is there if you want to look
It
at
is
it.
there, absolutely. I
Somebody with an
encourage everybody
accounting-
to go look at it.
Somebody
It's-
with an accounting background might make more sense of it than me. What do you see? Jobs are such an important part for any city to maintain its standards, to employ its people, to give hope to the young people. What do you see? How do we make our economy grow? Assume COVID's dealt with. How do we get back on a growth trajectory?
Sure. Well, you were asking about top priorities. That's definitely one of my top priorities is job. It's economic development in general, but that includes jobs. It includes business being prosperous so that they can hire people.
Right.
You know, we continue to, again, this is still a focus on the outside. We continue to talk about what it is that we have here, encourage people that want to come here and start businesses.
Right.
Hire locals, you know, to work in those businesses. And over the years, we've had a decent amount of success with that. We really have growing. So what we need to do moving forward is to continue to be and really improve upon being a friendly government to work with. I've talked to a lot of businesses that feel it's too complicated. We've got a lot of organizations even here locally that have been here for years that talk about how hard it is to work with city government. That should never be the case. Now, that doesn't mean that you just let people do whatever they want. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But there are cases that we can make processes work a lot better so that businesses can hire more people. You know, make some of this a little easier.
Has come up repeatedly with some of the candidates that we've talked to, is that the difficulties of making the way less complicated for people who are actually in the business of creating jobs and doing business, and developers and things like that. I mean, they just
Yeah, it's not all about incentives from the city. Sometimes it's just about the city getting out of their way.
Yeah.
And letting them create jobs. You know, I've got circumstances where I know of a small business that couldn't expand 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet and hire more people because the city required a level of permitting that would have eliminated his parking lot due to adding specific trees in certain areas. And it's that type of thing that prevented those jobs from being created. You know, we need to be more flexible and working with businesses and ensuring that they can continue to grow and hire people and create those jobs that we need.
COVID has dominated. I'm changing gears here just a little bit.
Sure.
COVID has just dominated 2020. When we weren't talking about elections, we were talking about COVID, and the COVID overstayed the election too. So, do you think that the current administration, city, county, state, has done has handled the response well, or could it have been improved upon? And how do you look at that?
So I've got my own look on that, and it is I have no idea, Doug. I mean, if I knew exactly how it should be handled,
Yeah.
I would have been out there on the front line screaming and yelling that this is how it should be done. It's easy to criticize a failed response. It's a lot more difficult to know exactly what you need to do before you try.
Well, especially when you're dealing with unknowns. I mean,
Sure.
there really isn't settled science.
That's right.
I mean,
There
science
is no way to
based on
gauge it.
knowing
That's
this
right.
much,
That's
and
right.
we know this much. So
I'm in technology. I'm huge on making decisions based on data.
Yeah.
I want to be informed to make some decisions. I don't agree with everything in the way that it happened. And if you look at some of the legislation that I pushed and worked on with some of the executive orders of the city, you'd see that, where we had some businesses shut down that didn't need to be, where, I had to jump in there and try to allow certain types of businesses to continue to operate. Under different, like if you have a permit to operate a certain type of business, you have very tight restrictions on what you can do. During COVID, that means you're out of business. So instead of immediately making it out of business, I looked at some of those and said, here, what we need to do is to put into place a temporary stay on some of the permit restrictions so that they can continue to operate and continue to keep those jobs open and people making money as opposed to being unemployed. So there was a lot of work like that had to be done. So there are some things that we didn't do right immediately, but we've corrected quite a few of them, I think.
really love to hear your opinion on this. I mean, we had more this weekend, had more shootings. It seems like every weekend there's more shootings. And Chattanooga does have a very high rating in terms of violence with the FBI. People don't like to talk about it, but it's actually, I mean, the data is there. But yet, I know that there doesn't seem to be much from a policing point of view that you can do about random shootings. I mean, it doesn't seem like that's a criminal, it doesn't seem like it's a police problem. It seems like it's bigger than the police problem. But yet I know a lot of people that I've talked to, who especially live in these neighborhoods that have these drive-by shootings and things, are afraid. They want, like you talked about they want a sense of community safety. What is your thoughts about the shootings in Chattanooga? I mean, do we make too much of a big deal of it? Is it something that somehow a collaboration between a number of peoples and groups need to help to kind of step in there, or what are we looking at?
That's a big question. I'll try to answer it
Yeah.
quickly. It's not just a policing problem. Like when it comes to shootings, our police are responsive. They can't be proactive, with the exception of maybe being visible. But that's obviously not good enough. These things are continuing to happen. We've done programs for years, reaching out to neighborhoods and organizations, trying to figure out and find out ways to do it. It is a systematic problem, without a doubt. It's a large-scale problem. And the way to solve it is you've got to have everybody working to solve it. That's everybody from the government on down to an individual property owner, and all the businesses and organizations in between, be it churches, be it community groups, be it boys and girls clubs, organizations like that can work with our youth, that can help them, that can identify these problems before they become real problems in our society and turn into potential, violence and shootings. It's a very, very big problem, and to me, the way that we need to be focused on it as a city moving forward is really partnering better with our community. The people in the community are the ones that know best, and if we don't partner with them, then we're already limited on the amount of improvements that we can make in some of these areas. But Doug, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had to sleep in your bathtub to feel like you were going to be safe and not shot while you were sleeping in your bed, but some of our citizens have had to deal with that.
My bathroom is fiberglass.
So it probably wouldn't have helped.
Would help me.
But that's nothing that anybody
Yeah.
that lives in Chattanooga should have to do that. And it's a shame that we have gotten to that point. And I don't know necessarily how we got here, but we can't continue to live in that place.
There was a shooting about 2 months ago that really caught my attention. Usually it's young men in their late teens, early 20s doing it. And having raised 4 boys, they never shot anybody, but I understand what it is to raise boys. But they shot 3 children. I think it was a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And the police, at least in the news, said it was a targeted shooting. And that just, it just kind of broke my heart to think that was going on and that we weren't. And I'm not talking about the government taking a heavy hand. I'm talking about just as a community somehow responding to that. And I think one of the things about being in leadership in the community like yourself is is you all have a bully pulpit. I mean, really do. I mean, you can convene meetings, you can call people together, you can talk about things, and I think that's a great place to be. Well, let me change the subject a little bit. Affordable housing.
Yes.
That has come up in these conversations over and over again, that there's not enough. And what happened, as I understand it, is gentrification came in, pushed a lot of the housing, and then prices for housing has just gone up all over the place. I mean, communities, I talked to somebody, one of your colleagues just the other day, who's basically flipping houses in Alton Park, and so nothing's wrong with that. He's making a living. There's nothing wrong with it, but he is doing it, and so prices are going up and making people who have less money. So they brought up the whole notion of affordable housing. Is that anything the city can do about it? It seems to me there is, but what do you think?
There is definitely something, if nothing but the conversation is powerful enough if we're having the right kind of conversation. But it's one of those things where Chattanooga ends up being a victim of its own success. I mean, you hear, and we talked about it earlier, where Chattanooga is growing. It's becoming a great place for people to come. Well, when that happens and we continue to do development, we continue to make improvements, prices go up, property taxes go up. It drives out a lot of people from neighborhoods. And when you've got a singular focus, like I was talking about earlier, of bringing people in, and you're not focused on those that are already here, that type of thing happens. So we need to be somewhat cognizant of that. I have people call and say, you need to prevent homes in my neighborhood, or developers from buying homes in my neighborhood. I can't do that. That is not something legally that the city council or any government can do. If a person chooses to sell their home, that is their choice. It's their property. Well, when you have some developers that go into some of these neighborhoods and realize on down the road, maybe not next year, but maybe 5 years from now, this property is going to be worth a lot more money, so I'm going to go and buy these homes as cheap as I can get them, and then I'm going to slowly renovate them and eventually maybe tear them down and build something bigger. That is what spurs and continues to drive a lot of this gentrification. But if that property owner chooses to sell that piece of property, there is nothing government can do to prevent that. So it's an ongoing, so that goes back to the affordable housing piece as well. It is something that we need to stay focused on, and what I have done, there are a few districts in the city that talk about it more often. We need more of it in certain districts, is what you hear, and talking about the people that are typically asking for it in the areas that they live.
Right.
District 8, for example, I think there's 15 affordable housing, I'm not just going to say units, because some of them are individual, some of them are larger units of affordable housing. And Councilman Byrd, that is the council person over that district, has worked for years, almost 4 years now that he's been on council, to increase the amount of affordable housing, because that's what his district has asked for in that area, and I've worked very closely with him to ensure that that happens. So there are certain areas that are most beneficial, and there are ways that we can either incentivize development to do it, or again, we can get out of the way and allow it to happen. But the city doesn't have enough money to just buy, hundreds and hundreds of homes and give them away.
Don't they own a lot of property, though?
We do. And actually,
responsible for a lot of property?
My intent several years ago was to help create a land bank authority for the city of Chattanooga.
Ooh, I like that.
We created one, and to my knowledge, it has done little to nothing. So the idea was you create this authority, you take all these dilapidated properties, all these properties that have been on the back tax roll that are now the city's, and you transfer them into this authority. Once they're in the authority, there's still red tape that you have to cut through and what you need to do there. But once they're a part of that authority, we should be working to get those properties back out of the authority and into the hands of property owners, preferably. And if that means forgiving the taxes or forgiving the price on this piece of property, but allowing a developer now to be able to build on it and build affordable housing on it and allow somebody to become an owner instead of a renter, those are the things that improve the quality of life, not just for that individual, but for your neighborhoods. I mean, your neighborhoods that have healthy, proud homeowners typically have a lower amount of crime, because you're watching out for your neighborhoods, and we need to be improving that throughout our community and improving home ownership. And I think that in and of itself will help some of the issues that we're dealing with in the community.
One last question, and this has to do with something that didn't work, but I wonder what your thoughts are. There was an effort to create a community control board, one that passed in March that was had less, I would say, teeth to it. And then one, they got 6,000 signatures to put on the ballot in this election in March. Not March, it would have been August, I guess, or November. But anyway, there was one that was an effort. They got 6,000 signatures to put it on the ballot in this March, and they fell short. But it was an effort to create a community control board for the police that included subpoena powering. And it didn't have enough votes. But again, they had 6,000 people say they wanted it, who said they were citizens of the city or registered voters. What is your response to that? Defunding the police, reallocating funds. I got a feeling I know, but can you tell me?
So we created a police oversight board, PARC,
Right.
Police Oversight Committee, and then we also made sure that it would be part of the charter. So a future mayor, a future council can't just abolish the committee. There are people that believe that it should have a lot more teeth, which is where this movement came from.
Yep.
I don't agree with it. I don't agree with what was put forward to be put on the ballot, and the reason being wasn't the lack of needing some level of oversight. I've shown my support for that.
Yep.
It was a group of individuals appointed by community members would have subpoena, hiring, and firing authority over public safety. And to me, that's why you have an elected official.
Right.
So I was not in favor of non-publicly elected individuals having that level of authority over a city government, especially public safety. It takes a lot to understand how that works. So to me, and my argument to some of the individuals who were involved was like, this is great. This is what you believe in. I'm fine with that. Go get the petition. That is part of what we do as a democracy here. But if it fails, work on elected leaders to carry your message forward. It needs to be from the electorate, not from community appointed individuals that get to make those decisions. That's what elected officials are for. We are also the speakers of the people. That's who voted to put us here.
Right.
So those are the hands that I believe those types of decisions and the authority needs to fall. As far as defunding, I don't agree with that at all, not one bit. As far as reallocation of dollars, I think it's a different conversation.
Okay.
I think our police department is taxed with doing things it was never intended to do. I have no disagreement with that whatsoever, nor do I think most of our police officers would disagree with that. The difference being who gets to make the decision on who gets to go where. If somebody calls in, who gets to decide whether that is just a domestic violence call, but a I guess it's hard to say domestic violence of any kind is not the kind that would elicit a police response, but I've heard that one used. Let's say mental illness. That's one of our biggest ones.
Yes.
If a call is about mental illness, police are probably not the ideal individuals to respond, and they've got violent things they need to be responding to. But at the same time, who gets to decide who that call is, and who gets to decide whether that person is a danger to the people around them or to anybody to respond? I've talked to people in the mental health industry or business, and they've said they go on those calls, but they would never go on one of those calls without an officer present. Because I don't think the person calling 911 is qualified to determine whether it is a violent situation or not, nor do I think the 911 operator, based on the information they're being given, is qualified. So can it be done? Absolutely, it's got to be. There's areas in this country that have been successful at reducing the types of calls that the police respond to. It doesn't mean that we don't need the police officers. They're plenty busy and can be plenty busy with other calls that are violent, that are crime in nature. I would love to find a way to subsidize some of those services for people that need different types of services and maybe a police response. But I don't agree one bit with defunding the police to make it work. It would be more of an enhancement of services and maybe other people that are focused with that type of service that are in the police department
Well,
itself.
I'd love to do a whole program at some point about mental illness in the community and how we respond to it, because right now you send the police if you got a problem, and those people don't really need to be in jail unless they're violent.
Right.
And
That
so it's,
I agree 100%.
but we don't. I know there's some people working on some stuff, but well, listen, that's really all my questions. Anything else you'd like to say? Any last words?
No, I mean I appreciate the opportunity to come in. It's been amazing serving over the last 8 years. I feel like we have got a lot done. I don't feel like we'll ever do enough. We wouldn't be talking about Chattanooga having any problems if there wasn't a lot of work to still be done. So,
Well, and we're very much a changing community. This
right.
is not what it was 20 years ago.
It's not. You're right. And honestly, just the last year has seen probably more change than a culmination of 5 or 10 years previous. Just the difference in how business operates in the last year has been remarkable in a short period of time. There's a lot of adaptation that had to happen in both the workers and business and everybody else, in order to come out positive on the other side. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. It's going to take a lot of work, to overcome it and ensure we're keeping people safe in the meantime.
Well, I'm sure with smart folks, we got a lot of smart folks in Chattanooga. I mean, there's a lot of people who are clever and thoughtful and care about the community. And I think that mixing them together in the right mix is, I think, part of the job of leadership like yours.
It should be, Doug. It should be. Yeah. The day that we, and by we, certain people more than others, really shift a focus to results as opposed to credit for work being done, the better the results are going to be. And that allows us to partner with organizations that know better what they're doing, because city government is not the best at everything. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So we don't need to be trying to do everything. We need to be working with people that know best how to get some things done for our community and partner with them to make it happen.
Well, Ken, thank you, and
my pleasure.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Doug.
Again, remind you, elections are March 2nd. Ken is in District 3. If you want to go to hamiltonflourishing.org, you can find his picture, and you can look under that. It goes to his website, and you can learn more about him. There's also we've been scrolling as we through the program. Ken's website's there. It's electKenSmith.com. And also his phone number is available. He'd love to hear from you if you want to volunteer or help him in some way. So get in touch with him there. The election, again, is March 2nd, and we hope you vote, and we hope you can do early voting if you show up. That starts on the February the 10th. So thank you today. Thank you, Ken, for being here.
Appreciate it.
Best to you. Hope everything goes well. And we thank you for watching today's edition of Hamilton Flourishing.